you'd like to reduce your interest rates, please press 1. If you'd like to no longer receive this call, press 2. So, a little bit about card services. It's a scam on two hands. One, the card services business is a scam. They allege that they're associated with Master or Visa card, and they're not. They allege that they know the secret handshake to reduce interest rates, and they don't. And part of their outfit is actually selling Social Security numbers that they're able to get from folks that actually try to reduce their interest rates. So it's a scam on multiple levels for that end. And then you have the telemarketing end. Almost any call that you've received that has had a robot, meaning not another person, a live person on the other end of that phone, over the last couple years has been a scam. There's narrow exceptions. The exceptions are things like the library can automatically dial you if your library book is overdue, or United can tell you if your flight's running late automatically. But for the most part, there needs to be a live person. So there's that element to it. But more egregious is the fact that he's using sophisticated computer software to generate random phone numbers. So that's how all of us have been called. He uses sophisticated software to mask the phone number that it's allegedly coming from. So we get a lot of complaints from Massachusetts thinking that it's an outfit in Astoria and Seaside who are actually calling everybody for card services and vice versa. So it's a pretty big scam. The FTC is working on it. Chicago and DC office is almost full-time right now. And to put it in perspective, they literally had to use about 100 subpoenas to track down one phone line to a data closet in Georgia, and then they lost the lead. So it's incredibly sophisticated, and that's the story of card services. You're welcome to file complaints with us. If you receive that phone call and you're on the do not call list, we take do not call complaints. I'll be honest, there's not much we can do about it, and we'll forward that on to the FTC, but you're welcome to file a complaint with us. So the second area of complaints is the telecom complaints. It's annually an issue that we deal with. I think to put it in perspective, we all do deal with telecommunications on a daily level, so perhaps the propensity for issues is a little bit higher, but some of the common complaints we receive have to do with servicing issues. I was advertised as a service that I never received, and I'm paying a lot more for a service that I thought I was going to receive. Or billing issues, a lot of billing issues. So if I have a couple tips, one is to recognize that your phone bill should be read just as closely as your credit card bill. A lot of fraudulent charges are coming onto our phone bills as opposed to our credit card bills now. Your phone company can act as a third-party biller, and what will happen is these fake companies will doctor up either records or voice recordings of allegedly you agreeing to have your bill with their company added to your phone bill. And so AT&T or Verizon will receive this, and they'll start adding a random bill to your phone bill. I bet 1 in 5 of us in this room has some random, a few dollars that we're paying each month for a service that we're not receiving. So it's a really important thing to look at, and it's happening more and more. On the telecommunications end too, a new scam that's happening more and more is something called smishing. So SMS is the text messages. More and more people are sending out text messages that you've won a Best Buy or a Walmart gift card. Don't click on the link. Unfortunately, those links are embedded with malware that when you click on them actually infect your phones. And so people are getting access to important information on our phones through malware-infected text messages. This is the new way of phishing scams. This is how it's going to happen now. We started to see this trend when there was the earthquake in Haiti, and the best way to give money real quick to Red Cross was to text 22222. And are now sending text messages as their new form of email scams. So basically every time we come up with a great new technology, a scam artist is going to figure out a way to ruin it. And that's what's happening with text messages. If you're getting them, just delete it. Don't click on anything within the message because it is likely to infect your phone. Another issue that we have on the less nefarious end of the telecom stuff is the kind of a bait and switch with a lot of contracts. So I encourage you to know what you're signing up for, especially in the world of satellite television, and get everything in writing. When you're discussing it with the person on the phone, at the kiosk, at the store, really have a firm understanding of the package that you're understanding that you're signing up for and the price that you understand that you're locked into. Many times folks are having an issue with, I signed up for a package, that package changed after 2 months, I'm now beyond my trial period, I'm locked into a 2-year contract, it's $500 to get out of the contract, and I never would have signed the contract had I known what I was actually signing up for. It's a very common complaint. We can never guarantee that we're going to get money back or get you out of a contract. That would be a scam, but we're successful at a lot of this type of stuff. So if you find yourself in that situation, let us know. The scams are the third area of complaints that we get. That's a little high. Most states, that's more like number 5 or 6 on their top 10 list. We know over $2.5 million left the state to out-and-out scams last year. Most people have no idea that DOJ has a consumer protection section and that will try to get money back for you. So that's probably the tip of the iceberg of the amount of money that left this state. The number 1 scam continues to be the grandparent scam. So it's that phone call that seniors receive claiming to be their grandchild stuck someplace and needing money. The typical phone call goes, Grandma, Grandpa, I'm stuck in Canada, my friend did something really bad, I didn't do anything wrong, but they won't let me leave and I'm really scared, I need to pay a fee, I need to pay this attorney, can you wire me some money, and please don't tell Mom and Dad because I want to tell them my side of the story when I get home. Please wire me money quickly. And when I say that we receive at least 2 calls a week from people who've fallen for that, I'm not exaggerating. It's a very common scam, and it works. So the tip there and the red herring is the request to wire money. That continues to be the number 1 way that scam artists request payment. And the reason for that is it's almost impossible to trace. Once you put money into MoneyGram or Western Union, it's gone. And it's nearly impossible to get back, and it's gone around the world. It's picked up immediately. So that's the biggest red herring I have there. We always see stuff in terms of sweepstakes scams. It's always a big one. The door-to-door stuff will start here pretty soon in the summer. With that, it's often alarm sales is a good example. We know every summer there'll be some contractor that goes around, knocks on your door and tells you that there's been an increase of robberies in your area and that they would like to sell you an alarm system. They'll give it to you for free if you'll just put their sign in the front yard. And people mistakenly don't understand that the alarm system itself isn't what you pay for, it's the monitoring of an alarm system. And unfortunately, people then are signing themselves up for a 2-year contract at around $80 a month usually, which is fairly expensive for an alarm service. So the door-to-door stuff we'll start to hear about more and more. Before my time runs out, though, I would like to touch on something that has hit Washington County pretty hard, and that's the foreclosure issue and the mortgage modification issue. So in late February, as you probably heard, there was the large mortgage settlement amongst 49 states as well as the US DOJ. There's a staggered implementation to the settlement, and what we're doing right now is we're working with Oregon Housing to set up an outreach program, and we're also keeping track of anybody who's ever filed a complaint with us that's housing related. And they'll be contacted by our section to let them know if they qualify and how they qualify for this settlement. People who have been foreclosed on in the last few years qualify for a money payment. People who have been seeking for a modification qualify for STEP programs in order to help them get that modification. By and far, the #1 home ownership complaint we have right now has to do with servicing issues. People who have been trying to get a modification for the last year or so have been struggling, told several stories about how they should or they can't receive that modification, what they should or shouldn't do, and then ultimately slip through the cracks into foreclosure. It's this that we're trying to fix, and if you know of anybody in that situation, I encourage them to get in touch with us, and we'll make sure that they're kind of guided through this settlement process. I think I'm about done. I was hoping to leave room for questions. I'm sorry.
We do have questions, opportunities, so please, microphone on this side of the room, microphone on this side of the room. Line up, and we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So please do that way.
My question is, at what point do you refer people to their own devices? In other words, is it your fault that you're a sucker? Or how does that work?
How does it work? I'll answer your question kind of in a procedural way, if that's okay. Meaning, I'll let you know kind of how we work a complaint and to make sure that it's an actual complaint. There are things that are not consumer complaints, and there are those that are. Over 97% of the complaints that we get are legitimate consumer complaints. The first thing we do when we get a complaint is we'll send a letter out to the company, notifying them, we've received a complaint, we know there's two sides to every story, so tell us your side of the story or how it's been resolved, and CC us on any communication to the consumer. If it's a legitimate complaint, and the biggest if is if it's a legitimate company, at that point it generally gets resolved, and a letter goes out to the consumer that we're CC'd on that says, geez, Ms. Cullen, this never happens to my company. I'm so sorry this was your experience. Enclosed, please find the money that you've been harassing us to get for a really long time. Now, you know, do I give people the license to have a slip of mind and to, you know, harm themselves? Sure, that's, you know, it's America. You're free to do that. Do I give companies a license to take advantage of people knowingly? No, and so that's where we step in.
Eric Swires, Forum Member. First, great presentation, very informative. Thank you. You had mentioned that insurance is something, it seems like almost like a brick wall you guys don't handle it. Maybe that's handled by ECDS. Is there any instances where the AG's office does handle matters when it comes to insurance?
Great question. So the UTPA, the Unlawful Trade Practices Act, is the statute that allows us to do any of this work. And it basically delineates the areas that are covered as, that we have jurisdiction over. Insurance we have a small charity fraud division. And any legitimate charity that seeks money in the state of Oregon, whether they're based here or not, if they're seeking money, is registered with us. We get their tax records. And what that means is we can tell you exactly where their money is going. If it's going to administrative expenses, if it's going to a fundraising company. And that's the biggest problem, is where there's a fraudulent charity, most of the money is going back to the telephone raising service, the for-profit. You can call us and you can ask if this charity is registered in Oregon. I would highly recommend doing that with veterans, firefighters, and police charities. Not because they're bad charities, they're just the most commonly ripped off charities. A scam charity will most often try to portray itself as helping firefighters, police officers, or veterans. When a charity is acting in a non-charitable manner, we'll go after them. And there's unfortunately been a few instances of veterans charities that we've done that. In Oregon, you can call the hotline and they'll be able to help you out with that.
Right, by just going on the hotline, calling in, and give the name of the group.
Yeah.
A lot of times they have names that are similar to legitimate.
Oh yeah, that's a great way
They
to
have foundation to their name, or the good one has a foundation on it, and the other bad one doesn't. One letter, one word different between the good one and the bad one.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great way for them to mask themselves. Another website that I'd recommend is Charity Navigator, and they do a very good job of kind of listing how charities operate as well.
How much they pay for administration costs.
Yep, it gives the whole breakout.
$1 million administrator, or 90% goes to the telemarketer operation. So that's my understanding. Nothing goes to the charity.
Thanks, John. John Blackmon, for a member. About a year ago, I got a letter with a postage stamp on it from London, England. I have a fairly unusual name. The letter stated that a long-lost relative left some money. Lots of my ancestors arrived in North America in the year 1680, so this is a really long-lost relative. In return, I wrote a letter to the Metropolitan Police Department, New Scotland Yard, London, England, and they answered. And the original letter asked me to wire them money, a small amount, in order to receive the inheritance. The answer I got, they were very nice to write me a handwritten, personalized letter. They said it's a good thing you didn't spend any money, because unfortunately there's nothing the London police could do about it, because within microseconds after the money arrives in London, it'll go to the Cayman Islands or Bangladesh or whatever. So I just wanted the four members in your division to know about it.
Thank you. Yeah. The best ones are generally of that ilk are happening over email right now, and the research says that the best ones are actually going to Romania and Eastern Russia. I think that's what it is. Anyway, well, thank you again for having me. I appreciate it.
Wow. I feel that I want to keep in close contact with the Department of Justice Office, that they've got some good things going on there, so great. So our next speaker is Dr. Jim Moore. He teaches a variety of international classes at Pacific University. Dr. Moore's classes look at the Middle East, international political economy, and the U.S. foreign policy and conflict. Professor Moore's other teaching areas include state and local politics and political parties. He has helped place interns with political campaigns, government officials, and businesses all over the Pacific Northwest. Prior to coming to Pacific University, Dr. Moore taught for 11 years at the University of Portland. Well, here it is. To give you an analysis of the 2012 primary election, is Dr. Jim Moore.
Thanks. Well, it's good to be with you. I didn't count the times, but we've met before. The fun thing about my job is that I I get to hypothesize in public as all of you do sitting where you are. Since I've walked in here, I've had at least 4 hypothesis discussions about what the heck happened in the Attorney General's race. What's going on with the Supreme Court race, where all the expectations were thrown out the window. We have results that are kind of surprising. And the fun thing is, we do have a pollster sitting back here. We've got to get more exit polling. That's how we tell. Other than that, it's good fun guesses, but figuring out what we actually do with it and what the actual answer is, we don't know. But we can experiment, so we can watch the next time we have elections and say, aha, do we see a pattern developing from election to election, begin to put things together. So it's just fun to talk to a group of people who are as into this as I am, and who have good questions and good ideas, and now we'll try to figure out what's going on. So several years ago, I came and talked to you after the primary and said, what if they gave an election and nobody came? It's the same thing this time. We are going to end up at about somewhere between like 37 to 39%, maybe 40%. In Oregon, that's an awful turnout. However, compare it to our compatriots in all those other states that have had primaries across the country. Primaries where there were actually Republican presidential races going on, things that we didn't get to experience here. Average turnout in those competitive primary states, 20%. 20%. A lot of Republicans who follow are trying to figure out what's going to happen with Mitt Romney as a candidate and things like that. One of the negatives for them is, even with Santorum and Gingrich and Romney and all these people generating excitement, the excitement level was less than it was 4 years ago, just in terms of Republican turnout in all of those primary states. And so, for us, 40% looks like the end of the world, but compared to other places, we're sitting really, really well. Here in Washington County, we're at about that level. We're kind of 37, 38%, but there's some very interesting differences. If you look across the state, 43% of Democrats cast their vote, so about 40%. Republicans, 45% cast ballots across the state. So 45% R's, 43% D's. However, because there are so many more Democrats, that's 56,000 more Democrats actually voting. Okay? Then we get to the unaffiliateds, my personal favorite. Only 21% statewide actually cast ballots. Now that 21% you kind of expect in a primary because we've got partisan things going on, and how many people really do pay attention to the Supreme Court races, as we found out. But in 2010, in the general election, statewide, unaffiliateds voted at that same proportion. They were about a third less than the proportion of people who were registered as Republicans or Democrats. So this low unaffiliated turnout could also happen in the fall. So we've got more people registering as unaffiliated across the state, and yet they're voting at a rate that looks good in South Carolina, but looks awful here. And so this is something that candidates are going to have to figure out. We've got to figure out how to connect with them. And there's ideas out there, but it's an ongoing issue. Here in Washington County, the breakdown by party, 48% of Democrats turned out. So that's higher than the state average. Great. We'll see what that finally ends up at, but that looks good. And you can see that if you look, I teach out in Forest Grove. There was actually an exciting state legislative race there, so that'd get people to turn out. It might have been that we cared more about the Attorney General race here, which is only for Democrats. Whatever it was higher here. Republicans lower than the state average in Washington County, 38%. So Republicans didn't have whatever it was that got them going. Unaffiliated, and speaking as an unaffiliated voter, 13% in Washington County. Now, I was an unaffiliated voter who's decided that if the Republicans were going to offer to open up their primary for statewide candidates to unaffiliated voters, by gosh, I was going to return my card to the Secretary of State and say, send me that ballot. And so I got the ballot, and the ballot, of course, had Secretary of State, there is a candidate, Treasurer, no candidate, Attorney General, no candidate. And I looked at that and said, well, thanks for the choices. I'm going to blame Alan Alley for this, and so I wrote him in for every office. So there will be Republicans for the treasurer race and Republican for the attorney general race. And we know this very simply because in the general races for statewide office, there are about 3,000 write-in votes. For those two offices, there are 20,000 write-in votes. And so Tom Cox is going to be the treasurer nominee for the Republicans. You're familiar with Tom Cox. And then a guy named James Buchel is going to be the person who's going after the attorney general race. We will wait to see if they actually run a credible campaign. I think the odds are pretty low that they can run a credible campaign at this point. They didn't care enough to get into the first place and start raising money and put together organizations. It's going to be hard to do that over the summer and really hit the ground running by September, but it could happen. It could happen. Okay, so in terms of turnout, things are looking kind of desperate. As we look around the big races that happened, the one that was most fascinating to me, because of the mystery about the Attorney General race and the mystery about the Supreme Court race, we had a congressional race with a Republican nomination for the 1st Congressional District up for grabs. Okay? The Oregonian came out and said, we endorse Lisa Michaels. Okay? And Lisa Michaels will probably be competing with this very show because she is the cable diva. She did not see fit to pay to have a statement in the voters pamphlet. And so her opponent, Delinda Morgan, beat her. 56 to 42%. It wasn't even close. In the mid-90s, when Phil Kiesling was Secretary of State, he had a study done saying to Oregonians, so how do you get information about the elections? And the study was pretty clear. We read the voters' pamphlets. It's changed, especially beginning about the year 2000 to the mid-2000s. Now actually, and this is nationwide and in Oregon, most people get their information from local television news and those silly ads. And think about local television news as a source of politics. Murder, crash, breaking news, crash, crash, murder, murder. Oh, and by the way, there's some politics happening. But that's where most of us get our information. But what this shows is that among the Republicans who turned out, that voters pamphlet was still the crucial piece of information. So just remember that for future candidates out there, you know, pay attention to that voters pamphlet. It's still a very, very big thing. Does Delinda Morgan have a hope at all against Suzanne Bonamici? No, not whatsoever. But it'll be fun to at least have two names on the ballot. Then we get to our mystery ones, the Oregon Supreme Court and the Attorney General race. Attorney General race, basically a 2-to-1 margin for Ellen Rosenblum. In virtually every county across the state. There were only 2 exceptions, and those 2 counties between them had a total of about 2,000 people voting. So it was just amazing. Hypotheses. We don't know, because we don't have exit polls, but hypotheses. Dwight Holton ran as a prosecutor. People didn't want a prosecutor. Ellen Rosenblum stressed, I heard she did it here, she did it when I had him out of Pacific University, stressed first female attorney general. And with a lower turnout, that generally means the Democrats are going to be a little bit more to the left, and that may have resonated much better with that smaller group. What does the Attorney General actually do? And that got into a big thing where Ellen Rosenblum stressed, you know, we basically are the attorney for the entire state and do all these agencies and things. And Dwight Holton kept stressing, well, yes, but the center should be over here, basically being the prosecutor. Also, once again, with a smaller electorate, a more liberal electorate, that message may have been very strong for her. But I have to tell you, all these are hypotheses because they had a really low-level campaign for basically the only major statewide office that was up in the primary. Their ads were generic, their statements in the voters pamphlet were pretty generic, and while they had a 4-month conversation going around and talking to more than 50 groups like this, that's not very many voters. So it is something of a mystery. Here's kind of what I think might be happening, but once again, we gotta wait for another election to see what's going on. I wonder if there's some kind of unknown schism in the Democratic Party that the first person to figure out is going to A, be a Republican and finally win statewide office in this state, or B, be a Democrat and basically be able to say, aha, I'm going to nip this in the bud and make sure that we basically have this under control. It may be that what happened was unique just to these two candidates, but because it happened in every county across the state, and usually you don't have that kind of agreement unless it's Ron Wyden running for the US Senate against somebody who nobody's ever heard of. Because it happened in every county around the state except two, I'm wondering if there is some kind of a split out there that we need to wait to discover, to try to figure out. Then we go to the Supreme Court race. The odds-on favorite there, Timothy Sercom, came in third, so he's out. Nina Cook comes in first. Richard Baldwin comes in second. Once again, did anybody see any campaigning on this race? I read their campaign reports and it said they spent money on their race, and I was wondering where? For what? Did they have a meatball dinner for people and spend $50,000? It was so quiet. And so there, clearly, the voter pamphlet statements are what caught people's eye, and you have the same kind of thing. You have Nina Cook endorsed by Barbara Roberts, kind of pushing the woman identity kind of thing. If that's the commonality, then that tells us something important, but we don't know. We don't know. Sercom, the one who was basically endorsed by everybody, comes in third, not by much, but comes in third. Everybody's wishing he'd spent, instead of $50,000, maybe $65,000 or something. Kind of a mystery there. Now remember, the judicial races are fraught with all sorts of weird peril. You can't really talk about what you're going to do as a judge when you run to be a judge. Endorsements become crucial. What does the Bar Association say becomes crucial, and then you have to make something out of that. You've got to put it in a campaign ad or something. You've got to get that word out. But at least we had an election. Oregon has gotten into a habit with its judicial races of people resigning, the governor appoints somebody, that person runs in the incumbent, and the people basically don't come in with any choice. At least we had an election here. Then we had David Brewer running, and everybody looked at him and said, I'm not running against David Brewer. There's no way I'm running against David Brewer. And so he didn't have any opponents, so he waltzes into the Supreme Court. But two very interesting elections there, and mysteries. We simply don't know the answers for them. At the state legislative level, we had fun things. The fun things weren't in this county, but they were exciting nonetheless. Mike Schaffler and Jeff Reardon in House District, I did it in blue and that doesn't work in this color, House District 48, there we go. Mike Schaffler is the Republican, remember the House is 30-30, even, and Mike Schaffler as a Democrat kind of said, I'll play with the Republicans sometimes, and that ticked off the Democrats. He was beaten 2-1 in the primary. And the most remarkable thing was many of his Democratic colleagues in the House not only endorsed his opponent, but gave money to his opponent. That's a sign that you're not really wanted, or if you do win, you might have to mend a few fences when you come back. He won't be coming back. And then over in Bend, Chris Telfer, who ran for Secretary of, what did she run for, Secretary? I just forgot what it was. Treasurer, there we go, Treasurer. She ran for Treasurer as a Republican. She was beaten 2-1 by Tim Knopp. Tim Knopp has been in the state legislature before. He was the majority leader. Also beaten 2-1. She wasn't Republican enough for the voters there, and so they threw him out. The remarkable thing is that it wasn't even close in either of these elections. And so if you are an incumbent, that's got to make you think, okay, do I line up with my district? Am I getting the right message out? Because we will toss you out, and we will toss you out rather astonishingly. Here in Washington County, of course, the one fun race, Ben Unger and Katie Riley, over in House District 29. Katie Riley, the name's been around for a while, Chuck Riley. Katie ran 2 years ago, was beaten by Katie Iyer, so we had the Katie versus the Katie in 2010. Basically a 2-1 victory there for Ben Unger as well. You had them here, you heard them. I had students who were working in the campaigns, and it was fascinating just the difference in the energy between the two campaigns. The Unger people were just hungry and going out and doing things, and the Riley campaign, a lot of them were saying, why is this even happening to us? we should be able to get this nomination. And so you can see enthusiasm makes a big difference. It then leads to confidence as people go out and knock on doors, make phone calls, all those things. If any of you do head out to the Forest Grove area and look at Ben Unger's signs, they are an unmitigated disaster. He and everybody on his campaign staff are all U of O people, so they're all green and yellow, which would seem to tick off about 50% of the voters. And then they're put together in such a way that as you're driving along, you can't even read his name until you're almost right up on the sign. So I hope they redo the signs as we get Katie Iyer versus Ben Unger. Looking at the rest of Washington County, we really didn't have any other primaries at all, but we do have a couple of crucial races in the fall that are going to be really, really important. Remember, the House is 50-50 right now. It's 30 seats, and so everybody's going to be piling in money into the few races where the Republicans or Democrats think that they can get the victory. And Washington County is going to see that in Oregon House 26, where Matt Wingard is running for re-election. Win Wakila is going to be taking on Matt Wingard. It's going to be, it could go either way. It could go either way. And the way I see this, the way I make this prediction is, I simply look at the turnout of Republicans versus Democrats in the primary. If they're about the same, that means that the enthusiasm is about the same, and we're going to go from there. Other places you look, and it's like in the city of Portland, the Democrats will turn out and they'll win with 6,000 votes total cast, and the Republicans will have about 800 votes total cast. The Republicans have no chance. But in these House races, you can see that. Another place we're going to see this, it's kind of outside the realm, but there's an exciting Republican candidate to take on Jeff Barker in Oregon House 28, Manuel Castañeda. He's a bootstrap, up from his bootstraps guy, started his own company, kind of the entrepreneurial spirit. It'll be a real test to see if somebody who says, I can fix the economy because I created jobs, versus somebody who says, I've been in the House for a while and I represent the district well, how that message works out. So I don't know if that'll be close, but it's going to be exciting to watch. And then the last one is going to be Sean Lindsay defending his seat in Oregon House 30. Adriana Canas is taking him on. Sean just has been in for one term. He and Suzanne Bonamici were in charge of the redistricting. And so Sean's district actually changed, and so we'll see if he kind of made it so that he's more secure in his district or not. I have a little bit of a skin in this game because I used to be in his district and now I'm not. I live in Rock Creek, right across the freeway. We were moved from the Hillsborough-centric districts to the Beaverton-centric districts. And it's fascinating because in 2010, Rock Creek, which has 2 precincts in it, voted for John Kitzhaber over Chris Dudley by 2 votes. 1 precinct voted for Kitzhaber by 8, and 1 voted for Dudley by 6. And so I can easily see Sean, I don't have no idea if this happened, but I can see him saying, I'm a Republican, ooh, let's get rid of the 50-50 places. Let's keep the Republican places in my district, and Suzanne Bonamici Senate District can handle whatever we send them that way. So it's going to be fascinating to watch that particular race. Other things that we need to talk about before we shift to a little bit broader thing here. Money measures. Money measures passed Hillsborough, Forest Grove, Banks, 50-50, but 13 votes to the good in Banks for their school stuff. When you look around the state, it was actually rather surprising. In 2010, money measures, by and large, failed around the state. Economy, people looking out there saying, what's going on with my taxes? Here in Washington County, they passed, even if just barely in Banks. And around the state, it was about 50-50. Places like Josephine County said, we're not going to fund the sheriff's office, and so basically they're going to shut down the sheriff's office. Curry County decided not to put their sales tax on the ballot. They're going to hope that Congress comes up with more timber money, maybe, but that's short term no matter what. But in other places around the state, people said, hey, we're going to vote for this stuff. And so, once again, without exit polls, we don't know what's going on. But because of 2010 to now, it looks like people are feeling a little better about the economy. That seems to be what's driving a lot of this. Okay? Last but not least, Clackamas County which isn't us, but Clackamas County is just going to have a heck of a fun election. For a county commissioner, basically the people who believe that Portlandification is a bad thing and light rail should make a U-turn and go back some other way, won primaries so that they're going to go into an election in the fall. Right now, if you look at party registration and who supports urban growth boundary things and light rail things and that kind of stuff on their 5-member county commission, it's 4-1 for we're part of the Portland area. There are, the election could go so that it's 3-2 for stop Portland from coming down here. Now, how that is going to echo here, boy, people get cranky about Metro. Boy, do they get cranky about Metro. I have all these things going on out at Forest Grove, and Metro, you mentioned Metro, and wah, people are just flying all over the place. So depending on what happens in this election, we could see some of those ideas come into Washington County, possibly focusing on Metro seats, possibly focusing on whether or not the county commission, we should vote it one way or the other. We already have a 3-2 split in our county commission, so it might just be you just focus on one of those seats, whatever it happens to be. But that's going to be just a humdinger out there as we play with that. So at that, I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. It was a small election, but there's just stuff, lots of stuff. So let's get questions and get a conversation going here.
Both sides of the room, and we have about 8 minutes for a Q&A, and then we're going to turn it over to John to talk about next, what's coming up, and then if you want to stick around, maybe our speakers will stick around for a little bit of time that they can take some of your questions, and the viewers, I'm sorry that you're not here to be able to ask your questions.
Great, so we'll start on the left.
Professor.
I don't know politically if that's where you are, but we'll start on my left. You're right.
Is my microphone working?
Yeah.
Professor, I would be remiss as a parent if I didn't try to kiss up a little bit. My son, Michael Tyne, will be a student of yours next semester at Pacific.
Oh.
So,
okay.
He didn't want to be here because he didn't want to too much kissing up. But he may have.
Has he written his paper yet?
Pardon?
Has he written his paper for me yet?
No.
Okay, just wondering.
Okay. With regard to the race for Supreme Court, don't you think there's sort of a built-in stopgap within the profession? If somebody was like clearly unsuited, the profession would have risen up a little bit, as essentially getting the cook fatally though without much success. Don't some of the professional groups have sort of like a stopgap, like they scream, this person's clearly not qualified?
You know, in the good old days, that's exactly what would happen. If the Bar Association gave an unqualified or even a neutral kind of thing, that candidate was doomed. But in the past 15 years, and it's not just here, it's nationwide, in the past 15 years, we've seen that change. We saw it change beginning in California. Remember, it's been now 30 years ago. But the Chief Justice, Rose Bird, was basically recalled from office because of stances on some budget things, but it mainly had to do with death penalty kinds of things. And the politics just drove that regardless of the qualifications from the professional groups. We've now seen that happen across the country. Sandra Day O'Connor gave a wonderful talk, and she really pushes this as an issue several years ago. In a lot of states, there's real questions about whether the electing of judges is the right way to go, because what do you do if somebody gives you a lot of campaign money and then they have a case that comes before you? There was a huge scandal in West Virginia along these very lines. And so it's the good old days, you're absolutely right, but it is changing right now. So.
Ann Madden, forum member. Getting back to that Attorney General race, you didn't talk about the out-of-state money, or the marijuana, or the mamas. I'm really thinking that it's women who wanted a woman Attorney General.
Yeah, they're very good, but once again, without exit polling,
right.
I can't tell how many women turned out.
Okay.
All I can do is look at names on cards, and I won't be able to do that for months.
Well then, sticking with my M theme here, Metro, you didn't speak about it, but Metro redistricted.
Yeah.
And Cedar Mill went to Portland.
Yeah.
And it was a shock to our system. And we are not particularly thrilled. We're going to now be in this Portland-centric district. Very odd. And Aloha also went south. So
Right.
things changed.
Yeah, things change, and it's amazing, because if you look statewide at the redistricting at every level, congressional all the way down to metro, things like that, the changes weren't that much. But I gotta tell you, this is my job. I do politics. And when I got, well, my wife got the ballot because I'm unregistered, so I didn't get a partisan ballot. But we got a new voter card this year, and I just said, yeah, new voter card, put it in the voter card spot. Vote by mail, what do you need a voter card for? And then she got her ballot and she said, who are these people?
Exactly.
And there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of that going on, and it'll be adjustments. It'll also be, hey, do we really belong with this community as we look at things? And so that's why these kinds of elections, when there has been redistricting, are a good time if you're a strong challenger. It's not just as the incumbent known across the entire new district, but boy, if you come in and say, hey, I think that you got had in redistricting, or I think we can really take advantage of it, you can make that strong message. It's a time of real change.
Hi, Emily Knapp, board member, also woman lawyer, and don't underestimate the Oregon Women Lawyers Organization as far as being a power in Oregon politics. I think we did real well. Yeah,
exactly. And the thing is, when you look at, let's get back to that AG race and your comment about one of your M's, the marijuana. Marijuana is not going to move enough votes to win an election unless it's really close. It just isn't. But was the marijuana, was it a way of saying, wow, Emily Rosenblum represents the progressive things that you really like? Did that become a way of talking about that? Not even an explicit code, but just kind of happened that way. And the money, she was able to pull even with Dwight right at the end because she got $70,000 from medical marijuana people. But their money was relatively even the whole way anyway.
But this was out of state.
Yeah, well, and the out-of-state things, but that didn't really become a big issue. She didn't make a big issue out of it. Remember, we've had this as a big issue. With the second time we voted on assisted suicide, man, the big thing was, who the heck is the rest of the country to tell us what to do? So first vote, 50-50, we voted for assisted suicide. Second vote, 60-40. Get all you foreigners out of here. So it can be an issue, but the hypotheses are wonderful, but what really happened?
John Bell, forum member. I'm concerned about the heavy money that we have to get to become an office to run. This coming presidential will be a $1 billion election, and even the city of Portland spent $3 million to elect a mayor. I mean, you have to have so much of your time raising funds, and when you get a representative, you've got to spend the next 2 years to get money for the next race, even if you're incumbent. And all the one that makes money out of it is the TV stations. They got all these 30-second spots you don't learn anything about except negatives or...
They all like their dogs. That's what you can tell from the television ads. And they like families. The money is a huge, huge, huge issue. We were having a talk somewhere in here about the Citizens United decision and the super PACs and those kinds of things. Here's what to watch in 2012. I don't think the super PACs are really going to have any bearing whatsoever on the presidential election. There's too much money in there already. Obama was originally going to raise $1 billion himself, but now he might only get to $750 million. Romney, it's still not clear if he's going to stay within the limits and take the federal money, or if he's going to break them and go on. Romney's having a tough time. It generated enthusiasm among all the people who were giving to the Gingriches and Santorums and things like that. But it's going to take care of itself. If you have $25 million as a super PAC, when you're in a race where one side has $750 million and the other side has $350 million, your money's just going to get lost. It's not going to make any difference. But at state level races, U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, state legislature, and here's where we watch. There's a very interesting election going on in Wisconsin right now. Okay? A recall, not like we would have recalls. We just throw them out and then we say, now what do we do? They have a simultaneous election to throw them out and get somebody else in and do all that. Here's the amount of money. Wisconsin is pretty comparable to us in terms of population and rules and all sorts of things like that. There is a good chance that there may be $40 to $60 million that has nothing to do with Wisconsin pouring into that race. And that's super PACs. Okay, so who's making that choice? Basically, the Democratic super PACs and the Republican super PACs hope they can take a message and say this is what people are thinking about as we go into the presidential election. But boy, you get lost in that. You get absolutely lost in that. Remember in Oregon, when we had finance reform, it lasted for about 1.5 years. But we had a couple of elections where finance reform went through, and basically it limited what candidates could raise, and sometimes they would be adopted by an interest group. And they had no communication, they had no control whatsoever. Sometimes it was a blessing to be adopted and have people running an expensive campaign, and sometimes it was a curse. You had no control over it. And so with those state level elections, that's where we're going to watch the money in 2012.
Chris, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Basically, we've got a few more minutes on the tape here. If you're willing to, we're gonna end formal forum program. Try saying that 3 times here. But then the questions are going to continue if you're interested, Professor, and I suppose if anything's instructed to the Attorney General's rep also. So I'm going to let John run that. John Lieber's got a question right now, so you can run as long as you have film to run it, but usually it's an hour program, so we're adjourned for certain purposes, but it's such a wonderful program, I'm sure no one's leaving except me because I have court. Thank you.
And I'm here in the middle of an all-day meeting at Forest Grove, so if you want to keep me, that's okay. John.
Program, Jim. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
My question concerns the national election, wherein there seems to be considerable dialogue that really there is only going to be a presidential election race in 8, maybe 9 states. And I just say to myself, what the hell are we to run a railroad?
Yeah.
And I just wondered what your perspective is on that as it applies to the whole country.
Well, remember, he's exactly right. The presidential race is going to be in 2 parts. First, 9 states. That's it. And you've heard of all of them before. They start at Nevada, they go to New Hampshire, and they include Ohio and Florida and Virginia and places like that. Okay? Secondly, it's based on how people in those states perceive their economic lives. If they feel things are on the uptick, Barack Obama wins. If they feel things are neutral or going down, Mitt Romney wins. It's basically going to be a referendum on Barack Obama and the economy. It wouldn't matter too much. Newt Gingrich would have been really fun. But it doesn't matter too much who the Republican nominee is. What matters is what the economy's doing, how people basically equate that with Barack Obama. Okay? Now, is that right? No. As I tell my students when we go through and learn about how economics works, politics works, constitutions, I point out that our Constitution is definitely the oldest in the world. To us, it's sacrosanct. We have lots of lawyers here. We love the Constitution. No other country in the world has adopted our election system. None. Electoral College, you guys are nuts. Okay? Now, the Electoral College can be good. Remember, in 2000 and 2004, we were in the middle of it. Remember that great day in 2004 when Bush had a rally down south of town and Kerry had a rally on the waterfront, and the Bush people manipulated the motorcade so it would appear on the Markham Bridge behind the Kerry people? We were the center of the political universe because of the Electoral College. Our few votes wouldn't matter if we didn't have it. We thought after 2000, when the Electoral College and the general electorate went in different directions, that we'd have reform on that. It didn't happen. I don't think it is going to happen. And remember, in 2004, we almost had the same thing happen again. 60,000 votes the other way in Ohio, and John Kerry would have been president, having lost the general election in terms of numbers. So it almost happened twice, and it's just the way that it is. We're just going to be sitting this one out. So if you're a Republican, cast your vote for Mitt Romney, write in Ron Paul, do whatever you are going to do, but our Electoral College votes are going for Barack Obama in Oregon. The West Coast is basically a no-go zone for the candidates, except for fundraising in Seattle and fundraising in California. And we hope that the parties can say, Mitt, Barack, could you please land here and wave at least? That's basically going to be it. And it's awful. It's just awful. Yes?
Lee Coleman, forum member and one-time candidate for House District 26. So let's
tricky part. Basically, even with the stunning defeats we saw for 2 incumbents for the Oregon legislature, if you're the incumbent, everything is on your side. Okay? So Wingard has had all sorts of issues, personal life, quality of candidate, quality in legislature, all these kinds of things. He won in 2010. I mean, he was reelected. And so when you look at that, this is where the idea that we have a new district, if we could get the Democrat to say, okay, the new district equals this, and I have exciting new ideas, that's where the wedge comes in there. That's where the wedge comes in there. The other thing is the outside money. Because it's a 30-30 House right now, there are a lot of people who want to break that tie. And so this, I think, is one of the districts where a lot of outside money that will have nothing to do with the district itself, but who controls the House in Salem is going to pour in there. And with that, I don't know which interest groups are going to do that. I don't know what their message is going to be. So that's, once again, it becomes a mysterious hypothesis.
Yeah, neither do I know.
Yeah, neither do, yeah, and nobody knows. And so that's where it's going to be fun. That's where it's going to be fun. Any other questions? Great. Oh, there we go.
So I think
He wears 2 hats.
Right. So I would like to ask you about this particular war on women. And in the legislature, we have leaders who are saying our goal is to make sure that Barack Obama is not elected. And they're spending their time not making this country move forward and do better, but making sure that Obama doesn't succeed. So can you speak to that?
Sure. A couple of my colleagues who've written books, and I've met them once at a conference. But, you know, what the heck, that's colleagues in political science. But they've written a series of books that looks at the relationship between Congress and the presidency, especially when we get to election times. And it's based upon the idea that in 1948, Harry Truman ran against the Do-Nothing Congress. Okay, and so then we look at that, okay, so what happened when we had Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan? What did that mean in the 82 elections? You know, all these kinds of things. And their latest book came out, and they said, you know, we basically said both parties are idiots in Washington, D.C. But at this point, for the past 2.5 years, they're saying, totally looking at the data that we have, it's the Republicans. Mitch McConnell, majority leader in the Senate, very clearly said, our job is to prevent Barack Obama from passing any meaningful legislation at all. And so that's where war on women kinds of issues and those kinds of things takes off, because there's just a vacuum. There's just a total vacuum in coming out of Congress. Now, they've also done the research on Do-Nothing Congress 1948 versus Do-Nothing Congress now. At this point in the 1948, so it's the 1947 Congress that's there. At this point in that Congress, they had passed 6.5 times more bills than this Congress has. So when we're talking do-nothing, we're reaching new lows here. Absolutely new lows. But when you look at it, the ideas about what, for instance, to do in terms of creating jobs are so wildly different. People say, well, you just need to compromise. The conversations are in different time zones. How do you compromise on that? History is pretty clear. Government spending in a big way will put jobs back. Good. But then the reverberations of that in terms of debt and what it does for the decades after that could easily prevent growth that otherwise would have happened. So you've got mixed messages from history. And how does a Congress filled with very few economists, very few people who've actually had to go out and try to make a payroll in a down economy, how do they get through this? Basically, we don't have the leadership. We don't have the leadership. If you want to read about leadership, you know, the book just came out. Look at LBJ as majority leader in the Senate. And boy, he was a horse's ass. But boy, did things get done. Boy, did things get done. And he set it up so that he basically was put in suspended animation when he became vice president. And then upon Kennedy's assassination, he stepped out, and it's fascinating. The very hours of the assassination, he was shifting from being the suspended animation vice president to being the majority leader of the Senate and making phone calls and getting things going. Many things he had started in the Senate, he was able to put into place. Kennedy wanted them as well, so he was carrying out the Kennedy agenda. But that kind of leadership we're not seeing in Congress. We're just not seeing. And until it happens, we're just going to go, as they say technically, muddle it through. That's it. So.